Good morning. Hello. It's lovely to hear the buzz in the room. Welcome to the 2024 Mothers at Home Matter Annual Conference. Woohoo! We've sold over 160 tickets for today's event, with people joining us online via Zoom and here in person in London, which is fantastic. And about a week ago, we were kind of freaking out, worrying because of the tube strike. So I'm sure we're all really relieved for those in London that we got here and our journeys were smooth. So phew. My name's Becca, and I've been a volunteer for Mothers at Home Matter, or MAHM for short, for 5 years now. I lead the support areas of MAHM, which includes organising this conference and helping mums set up local support groups across the country. A warm welcome to anyone who is attending their first ever MAHM conference. We're so pleased that you could join us. We also want to say a big welcome to our loyal and committed members who have been coming to conference year after year. Without your support, Mothers at Home Matter wouldn't be able to continue, so thank you. We hope you all come away from today feeling inspired and valued in your vital role as mothers. It's great to be back here at the School of Philosophy and Economics. We are so grateful to them for allowing us to hold our conference in this building and for their support of our cause. If it wasn't for our relationship with them, we would struggle to afford another venue so centrally located. As an organisation, we rely solely on membership fees and donations. So by attending this conference today, you are investing in the future of MAHM. Thank you so much for your support. A couple of housekeeping items for our online attendees first. Please do keep yourselves on mute throughout the day, as this will make sure our sound quality is as good as it can be. Please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to say hello to people, share your comments, observations, and ask any questions throughout the day. We'll be drawing from these during our Q&A sessions to ensure our online attendees are as involved as they can be. We'll also be saving the chat so we can respond to anyone afterwards if we're not able to answer everything today. If you need to take a break during the day, that's absolutely fine. We'd recommend you stay on the Zoom meeting, but just turn off your video, and you should be muted anyway. That way you can come and go easily, and you won't need to be let into the conference Zoom again. During the lunch break at 12:45, we encourage you to join a breakout room to chat to other online attendees. This is optional. You'll be invited to join a group, and you can choose to accept or decline this invitation. But I'll talk about this more at the lunch break. And if you need any support online, we have committee member Maria, who is happy to help. And for those of us in the room today, a few housekeeping items. Toilets are down 2 flights of stairs. In case of a fire, the nearest fire exit is out the main entrance where you came in. Please ensure your phones are on silent throughout the day. And please note we're not allowed any hot drinks or food in this room. All cups, etc. need to be left downstairs in the refectory. We're aiming to finish for lunch at around 12:45 for an hour, and this will be downstairs in the refectory where we just were for refreshments. Please don't worry if you need to leave the room at any point or if you need to head off before the end. If you have a baby here, and it's lovely to see a few at the back there, and you'd like to go somewhere quieter, there's a small room just here, and you can access it by going round, which might be easier, where there's a laptop set up so you can still see and hear what's going on in the main room. We'll just need to keep this door closed just to keep this main hall as quiet as possible for our online attendees so they can hear clearly. So this is only our second ever hybrid event, so we are still learning how to deliver the best event for both in-person and online attendees. So please bear with us and be kind if things don't quite go to plan. Everything will be recorded today, so if you do need to pop out for any reason, please know you'll be able to catch up at a later date. If you have any questions at all during the day, please grab someone with a lanyard like this, as we're all on the committee or the events team, and we'd be happy to help. We're just going to have a quick look at what you can expect from today and what's coming up. So there's a copy of this in your tote bags, but we've had to shuffle a few things around. So the most up-to-date timings, please, if you could put those up at the back. Great. So lovely. So we've got 3 great speakers for you this morning who will be exploring our theme of saving the toys to care and why this is so important. And we'll have 5 minutes after each speaker for a couple of questions, and then we'll have more time at the end of the morning to ask questions to all the speakers on a panel. So this afternoon, as I said, we had to shuffle things around a little bit, so they're slightly different to what's on your sheet. We'll be exploring motherhood and politics. So Anne, our chair, will speak about what we've been up to nationally, including attending the Labour conference recently. Then Madeline will be sharing about the Nordic childcare model used in Sweden, Denmark and Finland. And we're very grateful to have a video message to share with you this afternoon from James Heckman, who's a Nobel Prize winner and American economist. And after which his colleague Alison Baulos will be joining us on Zoom. Oh, and maybe James will be there on Zoom too. They're in Chicago, so they'll be joining us on Zoom to answer any questions that we have. We'll then wrap up the afternoon looking at ways you can get more involved on a local level, so including campaigning in your local area and other volunteer roles here at MAHM. So lots of exciting things to look forward to. We'll be interacting on social media during the day. The hashtag for the conference is hashtag MAHM Conference 2024, which is also on your lanyards. So do feel free to tag us or use the hashtag in any posts you do yourselves that we can share. And one last thing for me, we'll be asking for your feedback after today so we can learn what has worked well, what can be improved for future events. So we'd really value your thoughts and suggestions. I think that's it from me now. I really hope you enjoy the day, and I'm going to hand over to our chair, Anne Fennell.
Get really dry mouth. Thank you, Becca, and thank you to all the team who've been organising this, Jeff at the back and Lauren, and everyone downstairs in the kitchen who are doing such a marvellous job. And the buzz downstairs was so great. I think I could have spent the whole day just downstairs chatting to you all. And you're very, very welcome. And it's so lovely to see some really old faces who've been with us for many years, and some young faces, and people we haven't seen for many years. I've got Vanessa here. Hello. And some new speakers, and it's really lovely, and thank you for making the effort. And we've got Frank and his wife, Frank Cottrell, is he here? Oh, he'll be back. The Children's Laureate, and thank you so much. You've come all the way from, is it Liverpool? Thank you. He's a Children's Laureate, and we met him at the Labour conference, and you've made the long way to come here, so thank you very much. I'd also like to thank the School of Philosophy for letting us use a building. And one of the things that the Philosophy School tries to do is to enable students to live life in a more conscious way. We're told neither to accept nor reject anything. And I'd like to invite you here today to do exactly the same, to take time just to question, to explore, to examine. Don't either accept or reject anything that we've got to say, but contemplate yourself and think about how we can live our lives in a more conscious way, enabling more family freedom and flourishing, and really with a focus on the needs of the child. I saw a poem the other day which really struck me. It's, "What is this life if full of care? We have no time to stand and stare." And I think, life is so busy. We spend our lives just trying to make ends meet. We're striving just to make sure that, we can pay the bills, and we have little time to really reflect on what matters. And I think we've come here today because we all share a passion that our children matter, and that this role of caring really does matter. So I'd like you to take time today to really reflect on what you hold dear, what we value, and really what's worth fighting for, and making sure that it's there for our next generation. For us, it's the choice to be able to be at home, to be with our children. We feel that government family policy has lost sight of what really matters. We seem to have lost the focus on the child. We seem to have lost focus on family relationships and the family as a whole. And we also seem to have lost sight of just being able to be. And I think it's this being able to be present and just being with your child, which is so important, and it's so difficult to quantify. You can't quantify it in GDP. There's no sort of growth. You can't see any growth. But this ability to be, and it's only taken me 23 years and 6 children to realise, but the important thing is not what you can teach your children, or it's your presence. And the memories that I have of our children are the times of splashing in puddles and watching trains. So the importance of being is something I'd like to reflect on today. We've decided to call our conference "Saving the Choice to Care," because we feel that this choice is slipping away from most people. Most people can't make the choice to be able to be at home with their children when they're very young. Mostly people can't afford to do it. We need 2 incomes to survive. But this is also a result of policy, and policy can be changed, and we can support parents. So again, I'd like to reflect on this today and think, how can we create family policy which enables freedom for parents to choose how they care for their children? Most mothers are in work. We hear quite often that mothers are stuck at home because they can't afford childcare. But 75% of mothers are in work. And what we hear is that mothers would like to be at home more with their children. So really we would need to be part of the narrative and say this is what mothers want. Every economic incentive is really against the choice to care. And also we have a devaluing of the work. It's seen as being economically inactive. It's being seen as wasting your talents. And yet, we all know that it's what we're doing when we stay at home to raise our children, or what we're doing by caring, is really important work. Our contribution to society as mothers raising the next generation is just as important as the value, as the work we do contributing to the economy. And we really need to have this discussion in society, and we need to look at why and what the value is of the work of raising children. Turn my page. So this is really why Mothers at Home Matter exists. We're here to raise awareness of the importance of those early years and the child development and the need for this critical relationship with one parent, and mostly it's the mother. Babies do need mothering, and this mothering aspect is really important. We also try to raise the self-esteem of mothers and give mothers confidence in what they're doing, that what they're doing is valuable. And we're really the voice of mothers who would like to be at home more, because in debates in Parliament and in various conferences, we're sort of missing from the debate, so we need to be there, and we are the voice. And lastly, we are campaigning for an economic level playing field, so that parents do have a true choice as to how they care. So we're looking at a fairer family taxation system. We've started to look at housing, which is a big issue. And really, how can we enable parents to have freedom of choice? And we are we do have some serious problems in society. We have families are struggling to survive. We have a fertility crisis. We also have a mental health crisis amongst children. And a social care crisis, and I think David might touch on all of these points. But I am optimistic. We have a new government and a new opposition, and I think we have a new opportunity. And what was really encouraging when we did go to the Labour Party conference is that there is a sort of renewed focus on the child and this parental and child relationship. So I am optimistic, and there is an opportunity to tell a different story and to include this really vital role of mothering in the debate. So we have some excellent speakers, and I'm really grateful to have some really wonderful speakers here today from Sweden and from the UK. And so I'm going to start by introducing David. David and I, we've met quite a few times at various conferences and various meetings, including here. David is a journalist and a commentator, and he works for the think tank Policy Exchange. And more than anything, you are brave and courageous. And really, you've started to tackle this really important issue of care. And it's not an easy issue. It's a very difficult issue. It's quite gendered. And you get quite a lot of pushback, don't you, and sort of told that you're trying to drag women back, which he's not doing. But it's a really important subject to look at and to debate and to explore. David's been on various media outlets in the last few weeks. And actually, in a couple of days, he's going to Hungary to talk there, and we happen to be going there too, so we'll be seeing him there talking about this issue of care, talking about how important it is, and how we sort of lost sight of how important it is. And with the freedoms of being able to go to work, we've almost thrown the baby out with the bathwater. But I'm going to just now introduce you to David. So thank you, David.
So I've just written this book. It's called The Care Dilemma, Caring Enough in the Age of Sex Equality. Well, thank you for that introduction, Anne. I've learnt a lot from you and from indeed coming to this conference for the last couple of years. And indeed I quote you extensively in the book. And particularly I like the point that you make, your objection to the phrase stay-at-home mother. As you say, you're a stay-at-home mother who's never at home. But anyway, my book is basically about this... am I echoing? No. This underlying tension that runs through so many of the issues that we face as a society, this tension between our modern freedoms for both women and men, and the continuing care demands, the care demands that never go away for the dependent, young and old. And obviously in the recent decades we've seen a huge shift in energy, time investment from the domestic sphere to the public realm of jobs and careers and public life. And that has been a marvellous thing in many ways, but I think we've overshot and we've left an undervalued domestic sphere, an undervalued family, an undervaluation of the care attributes associated with so many face-to-face care jobs, whether in the nursery sector or in social care. And this undervaluation, I think, lies behind many of our biggest social problems. And as Anne mentioned, we have much more unstable family life than was the case. Not that there was any golden age to return to, but we have dramatically unstable family life, particularly in the bottom half of the income spectrum. Nearly half of children in the UK are not living with both of their biological parents at the age of 14. And that has picked up, that has increased dramatically just in the last 10, 15, 20 years. We hear a lot about social media and the iPhone as a source of the mental fragility epidemic among young people, and I'm sure that is a big cause. Jonathan Haidt has written a lot about this, as I'm sure many of you have followed. But I think there is another big elephant in the room, and it is that unstable family. Why is it that so many children are so connected so much of the time to their phones and their screens? It's because they're not having a kind of normal, healthy, stable family life. We have an ever-expanding social state. Now, that's partly because we're an ageing society, but it's also because so much of the kind of burden of care, both at the beginning of life and at the end of life, has shifted from the family to the state, which sometimes does it reasonably well, but is often not a very good carer. And virtually every problem you want to look at, whether it's the criminal justice system, people in the criminal justice system, educational underperformance, housing, poverty, behind it lies the family. As Anne mentioned, we also have this dramatic fall in fertility. We're now below 1.5, 1.44, I think was the latest figure for the UK. And this is not chosen, or it's not wholly chosen. There is this thing called the fertility gap. If you ask people what the number of children they would like, if you ask young people, young women, young couples what they would like, it's more almost, we would be almost back over the reproduction level of 2.1 if people were able to have the children they want to have. And we also have this recruitment crisis in care jobs. I think all of those things are related to the undervaluing of the domestic sphere and the attributes associated with it. And of course, the reason this is a dilemma, the reason it's a care dilemma, is because it's also intimately connected with so many positive things. The huge movement of women from the home into jobs and careers over the last 50 years. The financial independence that women now have, and at a time of less reliable partnerships, that independence is obviously vitally necessary. Women are less defined by marriage and motherhood, and of course, women and men are freer to leave oppressive or unhappy relationships. And the challenge for us is to raise the status of care without rolling back modern freedoms. And I've been very influenced in what I write by a couple of American academics, and I just want to read a quote. One is a very conservative American woman academic called Amy Wax, who says that, talking generally about care, she says, care is today undersupplied because more than most activities, it generates positive externalities, that is, positive benefits for society, that do not flow to the caregiver. This creates a mismatch between effort and reward that used to be solved by restricting women's opportunities to do much else. Having relaxed those restrictions, we do not have an alternative solution and are today living with the consequences. I mean, in the sort of dry language of economics, I think that sums up a lot of our problems. Okay, another American academic, a liberal woman academic. She would definitely call herself a feminist. She worked for Hillary Clinton a few years ago. She runs a big think tank in Washington. Her name is Anne Marie Slaughter. And she says this: my generation of feminists was raised to think the competitive work our fathers did was much more important than the caring work our mothers did. Women first had to gain power and independence by emulating men, but as we attain that power, we must not automatically accept the traditional man's view, actually the view of a minority of men, about what matters. And a quick final one. If a patriarchal society is one that undervalues the role and contribution of women, then the patriarchy is alive and well in the meagre pay packets of social care staff, the emptying maternity wards, and the one-year-old child clinging desperately to its parent as it is dropped off for a long day at nursery. That was me. I was rather pleased with that. So we need to give care its proper reward, but also stop treating women by a male default. Now, of course, men have to step up too, and men are stepping up, I think, more than is sometimes acknowledged, at least in the realm of the domestic sphere and childcare and so on. I mean, if the Time Youth surveys are to be believed, then we've shifted from a sort of 70-30 balance going back 20 or 30 years to something more like 60-40, even 55-45 in higher educated, more middle class families, professional families. So there has been quite a lot of movement there, much less so in the public care economy. I mean, women have moved hugely into traditional male majority professions, and men have not been moving at anything like the same rate into female majority work, which tends to be low paid and low status in social care and nursery care and so on. Although, as Una Smythe, who runs Skills for Care, pointed out to me the other day, there are now twice as many men working in social care than there are in the armed forces. There are now about 300,000 men who work in social care. It's still only about 20% of social carers, but we only have about 150,000 people in the armed forces these days, I mean, which is not necessarily to be celebrated. So, obviously, as Anne was saying, we need a proper family policy. Today's family policy is almost entirely about formal childcare and flexibility at work. That's important. But a family policy should not just be about making it easier for both parents to spend more time at work, which is essentially what our family policy is. We need a family-friendly part-time work culture during those reproductive years for both parents, with help from grandparents and the state. The current support is absolutely miserly for parental leave, as you all know. We have no proper recognition, as Anne mentioned, in the tax system, and we're an international outlier in that. Almost all countries like us do have some sort of recognition in the tax system. We have a couple penalty in the welfare system. We have nothing for stay-at-home parents, as you all know. We have the two-child limit in the benefit system. No wonder so many partnerships break up in those early years of high pressure. We also have this male default assumption that women have the same priorities as men and want to return to work, if possible full-time, and if possible as soon as possible after giving birth. Jeremy Hunt, when he was announcing the extension, £4 billion extension to the childcare subsidy in the 2023 budget, actually said women should not be wasting their talent on mothering. Quite extraordinary thing for a Conservative Chancellor of the Exchequer to say. The Conservatives always claim to be the party of the family. But this is reinforced by a lot of professional women commentary, organisations like Pregnant Then Screwed, but essentially take a similar line. But it's completely contradicted by all the polling evidence. Again, as Anne said, the Department for Education asks people about their ideal childcare arrangements for preschool children, and more than 2/3 of women who work say they would prefer to work fewer hours, and 1/3 say they would like to not work at all. I mean, if these, at the moment we have about, for preschool children, we have still only about 20% of mothers who are full-time mothers. I mean, if the polling is to be believed, the number ought to be closer to 40%. And this represents a huge gap, I think, between, probably more than any other single issue, the gap between political class views and the rest of the population views. The British Social Attitude Survey also asks people about what the ideal arrangements should be, or what the preferred arrangements would be for looking after preschool children. And less than 10% of people say both parents working full-time with children in full-time nursery care. It's 9%. So it's a tiny, tiny minority of the population who are actually represented by our current policy. This is what should inspire you as an organisation, because you do speak for a hidden majority. Now, I mean, there's already huge pressure on public spending, so we can't expect anytime soon to have kind of Nordic levels of family support. But we could, without huge extra spending, just by re-channeling some of the existing spending, we could make it a lot easier for one parent to stay at home in those very stressful early years. We could, for example, well, as I've already mentioned, recognise the family in the tax system. Front-end child benefit. Child benefit, if you have 2 children, child benefit is about £2,000 a year. And it goes on till the age of 20, if you have children in full-time training or education. If you shifted that money, if you got half of that money in the first 3 to 5 years, and if you also we now subsidise childcare, at least by the end of next year, we'll be subsidising childcare to the tune of £9 billion. If we gave that money direct to parents with babies, and that they could choose whether to spend it on childcare or on staying home themselves or giving it to granny or some combination of that, we could come to a home care allowance of close to £10,000 if you add up all those things. That would really make the difference for a lot of people between having to go out to work to maintain the living standard that they need and staying at home. And like I say, it would cost extra public. There would be extra public spending in there, but it wouldn't be a huge amount. A lot of it would just be kind of re-channeling what is already being spent. Finland has such a home care allowance, and a very large proportion of Finnish mothers actually use it. It hasn't been doing a great deal for their fertility rate, I have to admit. They're down to 1.3, but that's another subject. But behind this story, I think, is a bigger economic story about our obsession with GDP and employment. And I think it's increasingly wrong-headed, particularly in an ageing society. The Treasury model maximises the workforce, GDP and tax income today, but only really by making it harder to raise the stable families of the future. We have an employment rate in this country of 75%. It's already one of the highest among rich countries, among OECD countries. There are many countries with lower employment rates, but much higher economic growth, much higher productivity, much higher per capita income. And we should. It's one of the things I think you should be lobbying for, is for including in GDP figures the work done, the unpaid non-GDP work that is done in the home for young children and increasingly for old people. There are something like 5.5 million people over 75 in the UK, of whom about 2 million are over 85, and yet there are only about 500,000 people who are in the formal public economy care system, in a care home or receiving domiciliary care. So the vast majority of care for the elderly continues to be done by you, by us, in the home. But it's not counted to GDP, it's not recognised. And I think our GDP obsession is increasingly leading us in the wrong direction. And we used to, the ONS actually used to capture these figures. Your boss, Fiona Mackenzie, has written interestingly about this from The Other Half. These figures were discontinued a few years ago, but according to the ONS attempt to capture what's going on in the domestic realm, GDP would be 63% higher if the work that you do at home was captured in our numbers, and it would give us a much clearer picture of what's going on, and I think would lead to much better public policy. Final point, I must close my remarks. I mean, I think I kind of want to leave on a slightly more optimistic note, because I do think, home in general is going to matter a lot more in the years ahead. There are lots of reasons for that. It's partly because we're an ageing society. Older people tend to spend more time at home. They're not pursuing jobs and careers any longer. And there are many more of us who will be at home for that reason. We have the working from home transformation, the kind of post-pandemic kind of Zoom economy. That's obviously only works for certain kinds of jobs, but it's easier to combine jobs at all levels of the labour market with staying at home more, and combining that with looking after children or old people. We have AI coming in. It's going to wipe through a lot of kind of lower level professional jobs are going to disappear because of AI type automation. So I think we'll probably be working a 4-day week in a few years' time. And as I mentioned earlier, there's the sort of domestication of men issue. Men are going to be at home a great deal more because they are stepping up in the sharing of domestic labour. So I think for all those reasons, the domestic sphere is sort of returning to the centre of life, notwithstanding. I mean, you wouldn't get that impression from sort of watching the news or reading newspapers or watching TV dramas. I mean, it's the home is often sort of invisible, but actually it's going to become more and more important in the years ahead. So let me finish there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. That's really interesting. We've got time, I think, for one question from the floor and one online. We'll have a chance to ask David some questions in a panel at the end of the morning, but I think we have got a question online. Have we? Okay, go. Are we going to? Is there one from the room? Does anyone have a burning question? We'll go to online first.
Just finding it. Sorry. Bear with me. Susan asked, can we ask David what is his opinion on why fertility has dropped? Is it economic, social values, undervaluing mothers, or other reasons?
I think kind of all of the above. The public debate in the UK and many other comparable countries tends to focus on the economics of it. The cost of childcare, cost of housing, and so on. I mean that's a factor, but I think it is also a broader cultural issue, partly for the good reason that women are far better educated than in the past. They often spend longer in education, go to university, may do some sort of post-university qualification. The need to get established in a professional job. By the time you look up, you're already in your early 30s, and that you may not. You may have been in a relationship that has then broken up, and you're you're then running against your biological clock. So, and because there's very little sort of public policy thinking about how to make it easier for women to align all of those things, for higher education, for establishing yourself in a professional job, while also combining that with becoming a mother at an earlier stage in your life. And it's a difficult thing to align, but it's not impossible. I think Louise Perry talks about allowing women to have longer periods of doing a degree. Being able to take a degree over 5 or 6 years if you become a mother during that period in your kind of early mid-20s. But I think that that's leaning very heavily against the zeitgeist. I think it is demography, it is the collapse in fertility that is going to make all these issues much more central, I think, to public debate, because of the dependency ratios are becoming ridiculous, and we have to just sort of tax each other out of existence almost, because either that or have politically unsupportable levels of mass migration, which is pretty unpopular. So I do think there will be we're a laggard as a country, and most or many comparable countries to us are already pro-natalist, at least in rhetoric, having babies as a public good as well as a private good. We don't do that yet in this country, but I suspect we will. Either of the main parties. It may be the kind of issue that a new Conservative, a Kemi Badenoch-led Conservative Party could sort of coalesce around some of these themes. They're sort of there to be picked up, I think, by any political party. I think this is going to be the issue that sort of tilts things in your direction in some ways.
Just on the theme of family, in many of the meetings we attend, it is so negatively seen. Children sort of seen as obstacles, burdens. The whole narrative around the children and raising children is so negative.
No, indeed. And it sort of is true. Because the idea of the sort of unencumbered free person, which you might say is a kind of rather masculine idea of freedom, because there is nothing in a way that makes you less free in a superficial sense than having a child. You can't do what the hell you like any longer. And because we have this kind of rather naive sort of notion of freedom as lack of constraint, which is not really a kind of mature view of what freedom should be.
Yes, a couple of quick questions. Yeah. Carol and then and Denny as well. Thank you.
Yes, Carol Ulanowski. Thank you. To be congratulated, your erudite and highly researched book. David's just trotted out a few statistics. Sorry. What I want to ask you, you've made a brilliant analysis there. You've been in the media quite a bit. Have you other plans to get, like this idea you've just put about the domestic sphere? That needs wider explosion within discussion. And I wondered what plans you have to get your words out there and your analysis out there.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Sorry, I was just going to ask you if you feel that there's quite an aggressive economic idea behind the philosophy of women being at home, not being at home, in as far as we are traditionally, children were raised by nurturers and providers, and we have denigrated or ignored the importance of nurturers, as you've said. But do you not think that's because parents are very pressurized to feel that the best kind of parenting they can do is just providing, so that essentially children are raised with two daddies and no mummy? So
the to Carol's question, it's like one of those sort of patsy questions that get asked of the Prime Minister at Prime Minister's Question Time. You know, when will your book be available to everybody free? Well, actually, it is available on Amazon, and it's a lot cheaper on Amazon than it is in a bookshop. So yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm doing quite a lot of publicity around the book at the moment. And I'm getting some pushback from a sort of traditional feminist perspective. I was on Start the Week a couple of weeks ago, and Anna Coote was sort of saying, I just want to send women back to hearth and home. And I have to say, I did think about writing this book with a woman, and there were various people who I spoke to about it. But it sort of didn't happen for various reasons. But also, I mean, in some ways I was quite glad that it didn't happen, because I think that's sort of conceding too much sort of to a wrong-headed view. I mean, these are issues that affect men, almost as much as women, and a man ought to be able to write about them, without attracting flack. But yeah, I mean, sorry, to the other question, I mean, there is this whole shift in status that I mean, Carol writes, in fact, I quote you, Carol, in the book, about how there was this, in the sort of 70s, 80s, at some point in the 1980s, there was the idea that you could be a kind of an ambitious woman and still be a full-time parent, sort of disappeared from public consciousness. The famous sort of dinner party, embarrassment. If you weren't in a professional job, and someone turned to you at a dinner party and said, "What do you do?" It was a sort of suddenly became a moment of cringe. Which why on earth should it be a moment of cringe? I mean, but because of the kind of male default view of feminism that we had, that feminism was about competing equally with men in the public sphere, and obviously that is an important part of feminism and should be supported with decent childcare and a reduced motherhood, and promotion penalties of various kinds should be minimised, obviously. But it's sort of, the family, the domestic sphere just became low status, and all of the focus was on one side of the equation, rather than, there was that other strand in feminism, which was about raising the status of sort of traditional feminine virtues, if you like, and that just disappeared completely. And it was considered sort of, reactionary, really, and that is still the case in many ways.
I understand that they go back and forth, but
Yep.
but did that come from the ether, or did that come from the economic effect of global capitalism?
Did it? So what you were saying? Did it come from the ether, or did it come sort of from economics, or? Well, I actually think it came because that form of feminism was much easier for men to relate to and sort of embrace, because it was, as it were, women following a kind of male default, and it was reinforced by a lot of successful women. And I know it's a little bit taboo to say this, but a lot of women in academia, a lot of successful women politicians are childless, and that they were focusing entirely on careers, and they had sympathy for women with children, but it was part of that tendency to think of a successful life being the same as a man's successful life. The idea that men and women are not only equal, but essentially the same, essentially interchangeable. I mean, that idea, I call it the sort of care egalitarian fallacy. That became very, very dominant, I think, and is sort of still with us.
And can I just remind everyone from last year, Kate Silverton. So if you ever get asked what do you do at a dinner party, your answer should be, I'm in the business of brain development. Just if you need something.